You have probably noticed that the yellow and green markers that are used to underline text in books are very bright, and this is no coincidence. They contain special chemicals that allow them to glow a little even in poor lighting, and in a room with ultraviolet light, everything written with these markers will stand out very brightly. Today we read books much less often than before, but you probably noticed that there are margins or indents between the text and the end of the page. They have existed since ancient times. Since books were a rarity several hundred years ago, the edges of the sheets, when they were turned over, gradually became shaggy and erased. Plus, mice and rats often ate books. If there were some text along the edges of the sheets, it would simply disappear, so the creators of the books left margins to protect the text from loss. You have probably seen piggy banks with a slot for coins many times, but you hardly ever wonder why piggy banks are depicted in the form of pigs. A long time ago in England, clay pots were used to save coins. They were made from red clay, which in English is called pig. You probably remember that pig in English is also pig. Pronounced almost the same, but spelled differently. Because of this, over time, piggy banks were mainly made in the form of pigs. M&S are not just a popular sweet. A multicolored dragée is sent into space with each new astronaut mission. In general, chocolate has a long history in space. Even Yuri Gagarin had sweets on his first space flight more than half a century ago. True, chocolate then was in the form of sauce from a tube. It is problematic to send sweets familiar to us into space in their original form. That is why M&S is the favorite sweet of American astronauts. They are small in size, they do not need to be bitten, they are covered with a dense shell. They are convenient to eat in zero gravity without polluting the spacecraft. Everyone knows the famous DreamWorks Pictures studio screensaver with a boy fishing while sitting on a moon. You can see her, for example, in all parts of the cartoon, Shrek. Renowned director Steven Spielberg was one of the founders of the studio. It was the director who came up with the idea of the famous screensaver. True, initially the plan was an adult man sitting on the moon. However, the artist Robert Hunt, who embodied the idea, offered to change the man for a boy, and he took his son as a model. Since Steven Spielberg is one of the founders of the studio, of course, many of his films begin with this clip. The halls and seats in cinemas are a rather dirty place. Anyone who has worked in a movie theater knows this. The sessions are located as close as possible to each other, because none of the owners wants to lose profits in order to properly clean the hall. Employees simply do not have enough time, so they only collect large garbage and do superficial cleaning. That is why, entering the hall, you can understand that the shoes stick to the floor or something crunches under your feet simply because before that someone spilled a drink there or dropped some kind of food. And you know what kind of films the cinema staff dislikes? About superheroes from Marvel. It was they who brought the scene after the credits into fashion. Now, many viewers, whether it's a Marvel Studios film or a romantic comedy, sit for another 10 minutes after the end of the movie, waiting for the end credit scene, leaving employees with little time to clean up the theater before the next screening. On the internet, you can often find information that it was thanks to the advertising campaign of the Coca-Cola drink that Santa Claus began to wear an exclusively red suit. For centuries, Santa Claus has been depicted in a blue, green or red suit, but since the 19th century, red has become the main image of this character. And Coca-Cola was invented only at the end of the 19th century. The famous drink actually used the image of Santa in an advertising campaign in 1933. However, 10 years earlier, another American drink called White Rocks began to use the image of Santa Claus for advertising. Only few people have heard about this drink, and the whole world knows Coca-Cola and Santa Claus really became associated with this drink over time. Like if you also saw the famous advertisement with a red truck and the song, "The Holiday is Coming to Us." Supermarket checkouts are, in fact, a strategic area where many hidden secrets are concentrated. Let's start with the obvious, stands with chocolates, chewing gum and other non-essential items. We rarely go to the supermarket to buy ourselves a candy bar, and few people put it on their shopping list. But, standing at the checkout waiting for a dozen different types of chocolate bars looming in front of you, it's hard to resist an impulsive purchase. Another life hack is a narrow space next to the cash register. Visitors are forced to stand behind each other, and it is much more difficult to return the goods. You will have to apologize, push people, and this is unpleasant. In addition, there is no space near the checkout so that you can post unnecessary purchases. Therefore, many simply buy, even if they realize that they took an unnecessary product. If you want to buy a whole pack of oranges or tangerines in a supermarket, then most likely they will be sold in a red grid. But why exactly red? This is one of the tricks of the supermarkets. Color matters a lot when we make a choice. In a red grid, oranges appear even more vividly orange and more appetizing. The same thing happens with tangerines or carrots. There are many windows in the cockpit of aircraft. They are important for pilots to maintain visibility, and since it is very cold in the sky outside the aircraft, the windows in the cockpit have a special heating system so that they do not freeze. In rare cases, pilots are forced to open the side windows in the cockpit. However, this can only happen when the front windows are damaged and nothing can be seen through them. The autopilot does not work and the pilots need to land the plane. It is in order to maintain visual contact with the runway and successfully land the aircraft that pilots can open the side windows in the cockpit. Have you ever wondered why when we have a stuffy nose we don't taste the food? After all, it would seem that we feel the taste of food thanks to the receptors located in the mouth. But our sense of smell plays an equally important role in the perception of taste. If you turn it off, then we simply will not be able to distinguish the taste of completely different products. For example, if you plug your nose and let you taste potatoes, onions, and apples, they all taste almost the same. You can try this experiment at home. In most countries, slits can be found on coins, but almost no one knows what their meaning is. The fact is that for a long time the value of a coin depended on the amount of metal in it. The larger the coin, the higher its value. And the scammers cut off small pieces of metal from the edges to make new coins out of them. The solution to the problem was proposed by the famous scientist Isaac Newton, who at that time was an employee of the British Royal Mint. His idea was very simple, but at the same time ingenious, to cut small lines in the edges of the coin, because of which the cut edges would be immediately noticeable. As a result, these cuts are made on coins to this day, and they even have a special name: edge. Holes in donuts are not a random thing at all. There is a legend that in the mid-19th century, a ship's cook noticed that the buns he fried in oil were not baked well in the middle. Then he began to make a hole there and the problem was solved by itself. Today, this is also done so that the donut cooks faster and absorbs less oil. When we need to agree in writing with something or mark the correctness, we invariably put a tick. But why the tick? The ancestor of the check mark is the letter V from the Latin alphabet. During the Roman Empire, it was used as an abbreviation for the word veritas, that is, truth or truth. The left side has changed over time due to ink pens. When they started to write with them, the ink did not immediately appear, so the right side turned out to be longer. Interestingly, there are several countries in which the check mark has the opposite meaning. For example, in Sweden, Finland, and Japan, a check mark is placed next to a statement that is incorrect or erroneous. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are iconic characters from the 80s. The authors decided to give them the names of famous Renaissance artists: Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Michelangelo, and Donatello. By the way, instead of the latter, another painter was originally planned, namely Bernini, but then the creators thought that Bernini did not sound and decided to change it to Donatello. Oreo cookies are known all over the world. First of all, this product is associated with milk, it has a white filling, and in advertising it is recommended to use cookies with milk. However, in reality, the legendary cookies do not contain milk, so they are often recommended to vegetarians and people who do not drink milk. The manufacturer only explains that the cookies may contain traces of dairy products, but there is no milk among the ingredients. Most cinema halls have hidden night vision cameras. This is done for two reasons. First, resist piracy. Some visitors do not come to watch a new film, but to record it on a camera for illegal distribution. Hidden cameras help fight this phenomenon. Secondly, the cameras help to keep order and security, as well as to ensure that younger viewers do not get into the sessions with the restrictions of 18+ and others. So, if you thought that no one would see you in the dark hall of the cinema and you could do anything, then you were greatly mistaken. Coca-Cola contains caffeine. It is he who affects the flow of energy after drinking soda. In the late 80s, the company decided on a bold move and began to advertise Coca-Cola as the perfect morning drink instead of coffee. The effect is the same, but no need to specially brew, easy to take with you. The idea was not crowned with success largely due to the fact that by that time Coca-Cola was already a large corporation and owned several brands, including brands of orange juice, which, along with coffee, is the most popular morning drink. As a result, in order not to compete with ourselves, it was decided to abandon the idea. Coca-Cola is not the most healthy drink, so you should definitely not drink it at the very beginning of the day on an empty stomach. Most clothing stores have their own tricks that you may not have noticed. Not only in the fitting rooms, but also in the halls with clothes, there are large mirrors, and if you are not very confident in yourself or look bad, then, constantly seeing your reflection, you will want to buy something to look better. By the way, there are also many tricks in the fitting rooms. Thanks to special lighting, we look better in the reflection, more tanned and fit. And this works great, because if you like your reflection, you are more likely to buy this thing. The main ingredient in French fries is sauce. Few people eat this dish dry. But not everyone knows the secret feature of the boxes in which portions of French fries are placed. The back wall is much longer than the front wall and can be folded back, and a small amount of sauce can be put there to dip the potatoes. Of course, this opportunity is also available in other fast food chains. This is a cool hack. Pizza is one of the most beloved dishes in the whole world, and it appeared as the food of poor Italian peasants, who simply spread tomato sauce on a dough cake, covered it with cheese and sent it to the oven. Very cheap and tasty, which cannot be said about the most expensive pizza in the world that you can buy today. One New York restaurant makes a pizza that costs almost $3,000, and it is a standard pizza in size, but it is filled with truffles, black caviar, blue cheese and, most importantly, all this is covered with a layer of edible gold. And it is not clear how the chef came up with such a recipe. Many shirt models have two mysterious details at once, a loop on the back and a button on the back. It would seem, what's the point? The loop on the back has a very interesting origin. They appeared hundreds of years ago among the sailors of the American Army. The fact is that there is not enough space on the ship, and it is problematic to hang shirts on hangers, and if they are folded, they begin to wrinkle. The tailors came up with an ingenious move. They sewed a loop on the back, for which it was possible to carefully hang a shirt on a hook. Later, this fashion was picked up by clothing manufacturers for ordinary people, and the buttons on the back of the collar appeared at the end of the 19th century. Some of the most famous tailors of the time came up with the idea of sewing buttons on collars, two in front and one in the back. The purpose of this was to fix the tie so that it does not move out. Of course, over time, all these buttons have only decorative functions. Surely you have noticed that wealthy men prefer to wear a small handkerchief in the breast pocket of their jacket. Interestingly, the fashion for such a detail appeared several hundred years ago. Some monarchs and other nobles began to wear a handkerchief to use when sneezing. But since the fashion was distributed exclusively among the upper strata of the population, handkerchiefs were made from expensive silk. Today, few people use this scarf for its intended purpose, but it is still made of silk and is needed in order to emphasize the status of the owner. The dog icon that you often see in an email address is not as simple as it seems. Firstly, in many countries of the world it is called quite differently: snail, monkey, strudel, and many other options. In the former Soviet countries, the name dog took root, since on the first Soviet computers this icon had a shorter tail and looked like a dog wagging its tail. Secondly, few people know how this icon even appeared. After all, this happened long before the invention of the internet, the computer, and even the typewriter. More than 500 years ago, it was used as a designation for the obsolete Spanish weights arroba. This is about 11 kilograms. Merchants from England and America then used this sign in commercial records. For example, a merchant sold 7 skins for $2. Instead of the preposition buy, he put the icon dogs. Multicolored candies like Skittles or gummy bears actually all taste the same. A few years ago on Twitter, this statement went viral and was picked up by many users. In fact, there is a lot of truth in this. For example, the filling in Skittles candy is exactly the same, regardless of color, and only the shell differs in taste. Also, the final perception of taste is influenced not only by what we feel with the tongue, but also by smell and color. So if you're blindfolded and try Skittles or different colored gummies, you won't always be able to guess exactly what color the candy is. The eyes are incredibly important in this process. Seeing a light red candy, the brain perceives it as something with a strawberry flavor without even tasting it. The same with orange candy and orange, yellow and lemon, and so on. And if you blindfold your eyes and nose during the experiment, then guessing the color of the candy, only relying on the receptors on the tongue, will be almost impossible, despite the fact that in reality, according to the representatives of manufacturing companies, both Skittles and chewing bears are actually different in composition and, as a result, in taste and smell. By the way, often large international companies that produce sweets slightly change the recipe for different countries. For example, the world's most famous bear-shaped gummies are made by the Haribo company and, for example, some flavors for the United States and Mexico are made sweeter than for Europe, since people in the Americas have a big sweet tooth. The main attribute of a chef is a chef's hat, but what is its meaning? Of course, first of all, this protects the dish from getting hair from the chef's head. However, caps or hats can easily cope with this task. The chef's headdress, and even very high, is first of all just a symbol. Thus, the chef wants to show that he is the main one in the kitchen. True, today a long headdress is mainly used to enter the hall for guests. Wearing it in the kitchen while cooking is just inconvenient. On aircraft engines, which are usually located under the wing, you can see painted white spirals, and this is an incredibly important detail. The thing is that when the engine is running, it is very dangerous to be near it. As a rule, the safe distance starts from 3 meters or more, depending on the size of the aircraft. On the ground at the airport, there are many workers who are in close proximity to the aircraft immediately after landing or before takeoff. White spirals just help to understand whether the engine is running or not. Since without spirals of rotation of the engine it is quite difficult to notice. Many of us wear a pom-pom hat, but hardly anyone knows why a pom-pom is needed. Once upon a time, the pom-pom had a very important function. They first appeared among French sailors in the 18th century. On the ships of that time there were narrow rooms with low ceilings, and the pom-pom protected the head from impact. Then the pom-pom began to be used in the army uniform of different countries. By the color and shape of the pom-pom, one could learn about the type of troops. Today, the pom-pom is just a decoration. Flamingos are known to be pink. That is why so many people love them. But you will be very surprised to see a flamingo chick. It's gray. Why do they turn pink when they grow up? All because of the food. These birds mainly eat algae and crustaceans. Both contain a substance called carotenoids. It is this that, getting into the body of flamingos, makes their plumage pink. If suddenly the bird's diet changes, then its plumage can again become gray or white. There is no fox in the logo of the famous Mozilla browser. This is almost impossible to believe, because the picture shows a fox. And the full name of the browser is Mozilla Firefox. And every student knows that fox in English is a fox. But in fact this animal is the red panda. In English it is called Firefox. The creators of the browser wanted to emphasize their individuality and therefore took an animal as a symbol, which today is very rare in nature. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Also subscribe to the channel, click on the bell to always be aware of new videos and, of course, leave your comments under this video.